Hi, my name is Guy Lawrence, and thanks for tuning into my podcast today. If you're enjoying these conversations and you want to check out more of this transformational work, be sure to come back to guylawrence.com.au and join me as we go further down the rabbit hole. Enjoy the show. Don, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Guy. Thanks for having me.
I love asking everyone on the show, and I'm interested to know your answer to this. But if you were on an airplane and you sat next to a complete stranger and they asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
I would say that I've just retired. I'm a
Congrats.
professor emeritus at the University of California at Irvine in the Cognitive Sciences Department. So I'm still, part of the faculty there, but I'm emeritus. And so I would say I do research into visual perception and consciousness and the evolution of perceptual systems, and now trying to understand the relationship between the physical world and consciousness. So the hard problem of consciousness. So I would say that kind of thing, and then their eyes would glaze over.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people's eyes don't glaze over today, that's for sure. It's look, I've been diving into your work, and it's absolutely fascinating, and it's wonderful to hear a language and the science come into these things. The bigger questions is wonderful. And I guess my first question to you is why are you so passionate about this work and the hard questions around consciousness?
That's a good question. I think it's fundamentally because I'm a geek. And so I'm very interested in our perceptual systems, how we see, why do we see in 3 dimensions? Why do we see the way that we see? Why, from an evolutionary point of view, do our perceptual systems work the way they work? But I guess the thing that really gets me fascinated is when there's a question in science that no one can answer. When, with all the advances that science has made and all the remarkable insight that we have into nature, when there's a question that we haven't got a single theory that has made it headway on a problem, and everybody is flummoxed, that's really interesting. And usually that's where the new revolution is going to come from. If you look at those problems that science cannot answer, with all of the current theories and technology, that's where you're going to get the next breakthrough. And so one problem that we can't answer right now, there are a couple that we can't in science, big problems that we can't answer. But the one that has caught my attention is the relationship between consciousness and the brain or the physical world more generally. It's been assumed that somehow brain activity causes not only our behaviors, but also our conscious experiences. The question is to take that beyond a mere statement, of course the brain does it, to, okay, precisely, how is it that a specific kind of brain activity could cause or be my experience of the taste of coffee, right? No hand wave. Which neural activity and why would that particular neural activity and no other class of neural activity be the cause of the taste of coffee in my experience? What is the principal reason why that pattern of neural activity couldn't be the smell of a rose? So, and the questions I've just asked cannot be answered. No one can tell you for any conscious experience. I'm picking coffee and the smell of a rose, but anything, an itch, a headache, the color red, the sound of a trumpet, any conscious experience you want to name or allow them to study, there's not one conscious experience where we can say, here is the pattern of neural activity or the functional properties of neural activity. Maybe it's a program, not the neurons per se are interesting or important. Maybe it's the program that the neurons instantiate. Okay, what program has to be the taste of chocolate and could not be the smell of garlic? And why? So we're completely flummoxed. So 99% of my colleagues in this area believe that brain activity is or causes our conscious experiences. And despite brilliant people, and by the way, these are my colleagues, these are my friends, these are smart people, these are not dumb people, they're very, very smart. And they're giving it their level best shot. So, hats off to them, I'm glad they're doing it. But they would, to a person, agree that we can't explain one single conscious experience. And so that makes it really interesting. And that's why a lot of bright people, including Nobel Prize winners, are looking at this, because they know if there's a problem that's really halting us that strongly, there's some new insights to be gained here. It's because I'm a geek, but also because this problem is really, really central and could blow things open in terms of our conceptions of who we are and of our world.
It's incredible, isn't it? And do you think we're getting closer to finding out the answers?
I hope so, but I think that we have to have this radical change in our worldview to make it happen. So my good friends and colleagues who are studying this problem all assume that space and time
Mm-hmm.
are fundamental, or space-time, the, the combining of space and time into space-time is fundamental, that particles and objects in space-time, like anything from quarks and gluons all the way up to neurons and brains and so forth, that these are the fundamental elements of reality. These are the things that have causal powers in reality. And that therefore somehow neural activity or abstract properties of neural activity, certain functional properties of neural activity, are going to cause our conscious experiences, or be our conscious experiences. And I think that we can solve this problem if we let go of that deeply held assumption. But letting go of that assumption that space-time is fundamental and that objects in space-time are fundamental and have causal powers, that's a big thing to let go of. That's the entire foundation of modern science. That's what physicalism is. And so to let go of that means a radical restructuring of our scientific worldview.
Wow. Yeah, the whole thing just fascinates me. Do you the question that occurred to me then coming into that is like, if I stop people on the street or have a conversation, nobody's even questioning reality. You know, we just go about our day most of the time and we don't think about it. In your mind, how important do you think it is, and what do you think it will mean to us as individuals like myself who worry about the bills, to humanity, than the bigger picture, if what you're saying is leading into this new science?
Well, you're absolutely right. Most of us don't question our perceptions. We don't question much of this stuff at all. And so those of us who, are studying neural activity and its relationship to consciousness, and it's sort of geeky. And it's not really clear to the average person why you'd want to do that, and what's the profitability for doing something like that. But I would also point back, I don't know, a century and a half ago, Michael Faraday in England was doing these weird experiments with wires and magnets and electricity and frog legs and so forth. And he just did dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of experiments with iron filings, and just looking at and really writing down carefully all these really interesting experiments. It's just for most people go like, this is playing with weird stuff in the lab, so who cares about these magnets and iron filings and wires and so forth. But Faraday, to his credit, really was careful and wrote down all these experiments, and then a guy named James Clerk Maxwell looked at all of Faraday's results and realized he could write down a series of equations called Maxwell's equations, which captured everything that Faraday had done. So Faraday did this geeky, careful stuff that most people wouldn't care about. It's just a novelty. Then Maxwell comes along and says, whoa, here's these equations that completely model everything that you've seen. That Maxwell's equations are the foundation of modern electronics. They were critical in understanding, and they're critical in understanding relativity theory. They're critical to quantum mechanics. In some sense, from Faraday playing with iron filings and magnets and so forth, we're talking today by Zoom because of what Faraday did back there. So when we start to look at these fundamental geeky things that right now is not really clear how frog legs twitching could be of any value to anybody down the line, later on it turns out to be a game changer. And I think this problem will be far more influential than electromagnetism, because
Wow.
what we're dealing with is there a reality that science can study with all the rigorous tools of science, mathematics and experimental testing, that's beyond space-time, that gives rise to space-time? If we can actually get a science of a reality beyond space-time, the technologies that will come out of that will make everything that we've seen so far seem trivial, including nuclear bombs and modern electronics. We conceivably could play with the very nature of space-time itself.
Wow. So I'm just trying to, because I'm certainly not a science brain. I'm trying to break down the last bit what you said and then about giving rise to space time, because obviously we have in reality right now in space and time.
Right.
And when you say give rise to space time, does that mean there's something behind fundamentally then creating the space time that's then creating us the experiences that we're having?
That's exactly right. So
Wow.
and by the way, this is not just me, a cognitive scientist, that's saying we need to find a reality deeper than space-time that gives rise to space-time. It's physicists, very, very first-rank physicists who are saying this. In particular, I'll mention three names: Nima Arkani-Hamed, who's a physicist, a professor at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton. Also, Ed Witten has said this. He's also a professor of mathematical physics at Princeton Institute for Advanced Study, and David Gross, who won the Nobel Prize for his work in quantum theory. So these guys have all said, and this is a quote, space-time is doomed. They're saying the idea that space-time is the fundamental nature of reality, that physics should start with space-time. It had a great run. It's since at least Newton. It's been a wonderful and powerful framework, and most of our science and technology, our modern Saturn of living, is due to that. So hats off to space-time, and that assumption has been wonderful, but it's reached its limits. There's got to be something deeper, and Nima Arkani-Hamed, for example, is proposing things called positive geometries, something called an amplitude-hedron, a sociohedron, and other things like that, that are these specific mathematical structures that are not space and time. They have symmetries that are deeper than space-time. They have properties outside of space-time, symmetries, and yet there's mathematics that shows exactly how to map from these deeper geometries with these deeper symmetries into space-time in a way that we can actually predict, for example, what happens in the Large Hadron Collider when protons smash into each other, like 2 gluons hit and 4 gluons go spraying out. The so-called scattering amplitudes can be predicted by this deeper level of reality that they're discovering. They don't know what this deeper level is about, by the way. All they have is mathematics, and they're saying, look, there's this thing called the amplitude-hedron, and its volume. I don't know what this thing is. We know mathematically what it is, but what it's about, we don't know. But its volume actually gives us the probabilities, what they call the amplitudes, of these scattering events in one of the world's biggest experiments, the Large Hadron Collider in CERN in Geneva. So this Large Hadron Collider, right, is 27-kilometer round,
Donut, isn't it, really?
Donut, that's right.
Yeah.
That you put protons in opposite directions through that thing near the speed of light and have them smashed into each other. You're doing that millions of times a second, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of times a second, and you're smashing stuff together. You can explain those smashes and what comes out of them, the probabilities, with this new structure, these new structures beyond space-time, with symmetries that are beyond space-time. And by the way, when you do it with these deeper structures, the math gets simple. When you try to do it in space-time, you can get hundreds or thousands of pages you have to compute for each collision. With this deeper structure, not only do you see new symmetries, but the computation becomes literally trivial.
Wow.
It's a big pointer that there's a deeper reality. We're getting mathematical hints about it. So we're using, think about it, we've got mathematics as our flashlight into the dark behind space-time. And we're seeing these unbelievable simple structures that can make everything simple, that have symmetries that we couldn't see in space-time, that predict the data accurately, but we don't know what these structures are about. So you can imagine, as a scientist, this is like exciting. We're getting our first glimpse in the dark with our flashlight of mathematics. What is this about? What is this new realm with these new symmetries where things get simpler, and it gives rise to space-time in ways that we can write down? So that's pretty exciting for scientists, because it's a revolution. It's something that's been fundamental. Space-time is fundamental for centuries, is about to be overthrown. And that's where the next generation of scientists have a wide open field to explore what's next, what's deeper.
Fascinating stuff. It's incredible, and it's so great to hear you saying all these things, because I was speaking to you, slightly off air before about some of my experiences, and being in a meditation retreat about 5 years ago, I had an experience where there was so much energy moved through me. I became something larger than myself, and I felt like I actually went beyond space time, and
Yes.
I was as conscious as I am now, and and it was yeah, I can't even put it into words. I still can't to this day, really. But once I had an experience like that, it came back and made me actually question everything: reality, what makes it up, what the hell just happened, what is all this about? Um, and
Excellent.
but it was mind blowing, and that's why I'm so passionate about this work today, and being able to when I saw you and your book, The Case Against Reality, and bringing in actual science behind these things. So it's like, well, actually, there's probably validity into my own experience, even though it was my own experience from my own perceptions, and I can't to bring evidence to that because it's only my experience at the end of the day.
Right.
But
So yeah, what
yeah,
this is suggesting is that your experience is could be a genuine insight in the following sense, that most of us think of ourselves as little tiny chunks of matter inside this vast space-time. And that's the story that we're brought up on, right? The Big Bang happened 13.8 billion years ago. At that point, space and energy were created, and it was just space-time and energy and matter. That's all that existed. There was no life, and of course, there was no consciousness for hundreds of millions, perhaps billions of years. And consciousness is a latecomer, and you and I are tiny little bit players. So space-time is the big 13.8 billion year old stage. Our species has been around for an eye blink compared to the history of the universe, and we'll be gone in an eye blink. So we're these insignificant bit players on the vast stage of space-time. And what seems to be the new revolution in science that is suggesting that we need to turn that around, at least the work that I'm working on in consciousness, is saying, no, space-time is not fundamental and we're little bit players. It's just the opposite. Space-time is something that you create on the fly. It's your data structure, to use a computer science metaphor. Space-time is just a data structure that you use, but you create space-time. You're not the creation of space-time after 13.8 billion years. You create space-time on the fly. So when you had a feeling like you had gone outside space-time, that's because, according to the theory I'm working on, you are outside space-time. You're not stuck in space-time. Space-time is something inside you that you make.
there you go. Wow. So just to deepen that, to help make people land, because I've heard you speak about different analogies as well. Because I joke as well and say, well, my toilet's not in the bathroom right now; it's only there when I walk in.
Right.
Is that what's happening? Is it at the end of the day? Because you talk about if we were to imagine wearing a VR head kit, a virtual reality head kit for a moment, and that's been programmed, even though it's not actually there.
Right. So yeah, that's a good analogy, I think, for this new point of view. So when we both look up and see the moon,
Mm-hmm.
it's natural for us to assume that first there's just one moon, and it really exists and is really there no matter what whether we look or not, and that the moon you see is the same moon that I see. And we do little experiments like, okay, I'll close my eyes and you can look. Is the moon still there? Yep. Right. And we could send a man to the moon or a person to the moon and have them send signals back. So I'll close my eyes. So, am I getting a signal from somebody on the moon? Yeah, well, so the moon is still there. We could do these kinds of experiments, but you could do the same thing in virtual reality. So suppose you're playing a virtual reality tennis game with a friend. So you have your headset and bodysuit on, and your friend does too. And you see yourself on a tennis court with a green tennis ball and tennis rackets. And you can say, look, I've got the tennis ball. And you say to your friend, do you see the tennis ball? And he says, oh yeah, I see the tennis ball. And you say, okay, I'm going to close my eyes and look away. And I'm going to drop the tennis ball. Is it still there? And he can say, yeah, I still see it. It's still there. And you can say, now I know where to look. I'll look down there. And sure enough, when I look down where I expect it to be, I see the tennis ball there. So we do all those experiments. Does that mean that there's a real tennis ball? Of course not. You only create the tennis ball when you look. All you're getting is pixels in your headset. right? And when you get the right pixels, then you will create a tennis ball. The reality that you're interacting with when you play the VR tennis game is a supercomputer somewhere that you don't see. There is no tennis ball. There's nothing green and soft and squishy inside that computer. You better hope not. It's just circuits and software in there. There's voltages and magnetic fields. That's, in this example, that's the reality. And you have this simplified version of that supercomputer that you see in terms of this little green felt tennis ball that you are hitting back and forth with your friend with these virtual rackets. You're controlling the supercomputer to play the game without even knowing that, you don't have to know anything about computer science or voltages. You don't have to believe in voltages. You can control the voltages even if you're completely ignorant about voltages in the computer. You do it with this virtual reality. And the idea is that that's what our senses are. We create space-time, just like you create the three-dimensional space you see in the virtual reality tennis game, and you create all the objects. Like, look at the tennis ball, and I create it when I look. Now I look over there, and I'm creating the net on the court. Now I'm looking over there, and I'm seeing the avatar of my friend. Of course, the avatar of my friend is not my friend, clearly. And if I close my eyes and the avatar disappears, my friend still exists, and his consciousness still exists. My avatar ceased, but his consciousness still is there. Same thing with you, right? I talk with you now. I look away. I don't see your avatar on my screen. I fully believe that your consciousness exists, but what I see, which is something in space and time, namely my picture of your body, that's my creation. So your consciousness is outside of space-time.
Wow.
I don't see your consciousness. I just see my little projection of you, like I see your face. But you know firsthand, right? If you look at your, and we can all do this, if you look at your own face in the mirror, what you see directly is just skin, hair, and eyes. But you know that what you don't see, your hopes, your dreams, your aspirations, your love of music, um, your angers, all of your emotions, all of that, which is your real you, that rich world of your conscious experiences, you don't see that here. I mean, if you smile, I can get a hint that maybe you're happy. But that's not the same thing as happiness. A smile is not happiness. A smile is just a twist of the face. Happiness is a conscious experience. So what we see when you look in the mirror, you know firsthand that what you see is just skin deep. Behind that little symbol of your face is the whole rich world of your conscious experiences. And that's what I'm saying is going on here. Everything that you see in space and time is your VR headset. On the other side of that headset is this rich world of conscious experiences.
Wow. That's fantastic. So I was just thinking as well, and like I just imagine myself looking in the mirror, and like you said, only you can feel those feelings of the love and music, the joys, the pains, the highs and lows of everything. So is that saying then that's not in me, that's actually beyond me, but allowing me to have the experience within me? Is that?
Well, yeah, there's a deep question that you're raising too about what do I mean by me? Who am I in this, right?
Yeah.
Um, the what I can say is an answer that most of us have believed, but seems to be deeply false. For the question of who am I, the answer is usually I'm some physical system that weighs between 1 and 200 pounds, maybe 300 pounds. That's in Irvine or London or Australia or wherever it might be. So I am this physical body that has a certain location, and that's what I am. And I'm saying that can't be right, because space-time itself is not fundamental. So whatever I am is not something in space-time. Whatever I am is something outside of space-time that's creating space-time. But it may also, whatever that thing is, may also, not only does it create my body, right? Because my body is just a little avatar in this little space-time headset simulation that I'm making, but the very notion of myself may also be another construction. There may not be, what I am deeply may go deeply beyond this notion of a self. The self may be a very limiting symbol, just like my body is a very limiting symbol.
Yeah, got it. Hearing everything that you share, myself and my business partner Matt, we invested in a VR kit a couple of months back, and there's a game in there where you have to walk a plank off a building that's 30 stories up. and I
Wow.
swear, and we actually put a plank
Wow.
on the floor, just a normal scaffolding plank on the floor, where you would fall 1 inch if you stepped off the plank. And I put this thing on, and I was sweating. My heart rate went through the roof. It took me about, it took me literally 5 minutes of just breathing through, trying to slow my nervous system down to walk out on this plank. And then my Matt, he put a fan on, so you could feel the breeze, because you could hear the wind up there on this building. So then all of a sudden he opened all the doors in the house, and I was in it. I was absolutely in it, and I managed to get to the plank, and I couldn't turn around. I just couldn't turn around to walk back. And then I ripped off the headset. I was like, oh my God, that was incredible. And it just really makes me question the interpretation and the meaning that we give to information that's coming in without any thought to it first. And that's dictating the way we respond to the world in any given moment.
That's right. So we take this virtual reality very, very seriously. We're programmed to take it very, very seriously. And, you know, as a scientist, my attitude is that we have to use the best scientific theories that we have so far, right, to try to explain these kinds of events and these kinds of data. Not that I think that our current scientific theories are necessarily the right answer, the final answer, but it's rather, these are the best tools that we have so far. So to try to address the kind of thing that you're talking about, the best tool we have so far is evolutionary theory and evolutionary psychology and the evolutionary models of perception. And, you know, there are these ultimate and proximate answers that we can have to questions about why is it that we sweat when we stand out over empty space, you know. So there's the ultimate questions about why we evolved that, and there's the proximate questions. What are the neural patterns of activity that now give rise to that, right? Now I'm taking a neural attitude, right? Even though I just talked a minute ago about why neurons don't do anything, nevertheless, it's a useful language to talk about here, but with a wink, in some sense. So as a scientist, what we do is to try to address the questions you're asking using the best tools we have. And evolutionary theory does provide some really interesting tools for explaining why we've evolved these kinds of sensory systems, and also why we have to take them seriously. But it also, by the way, predicts. Evolutionary theory predicts, and this is a theorem that I just published with a collaborator, Chetan Prakash, and several other of our collaborators. It's a theorem of evolutionary theory that our senses have not evolved to show us reality as it is. It's a theorem. Space, in other words, evolutionary theory says that the structures that we see in our perceptions of space and time and objects, the probability that that resembles reality is precisely zero. So whatever reality is nothing like what we see, and that's a theorem of evolutionary theory. And for those who are interested, we published the paper. You want to read it. It's called Fact, Fiction, and Fitness. It was published in the journal Entropy. It just came out a few weeks ago. And anybody who wants to read the math can read the math. It's a theorem of evolution. Now, I'm not saying that evolution and evolutionary theory is correct. We may find later on some genius may come along and come up with a deeper theory. I'm hoping to do that. But right now, that's the best tool we have. And so that's what that tool tells us. But we can start to get at the questions you raised, which is, you know, I'm sweating, my heart is pounding, I'm taking this all very, very seriously. Why? We do have tools in evolutionary theory to explain why our senses evolved to do that to us.
Yeah, wow. So many questions to keep sparking here. Why do you think that the truth is hidden from us then? Because I've had this experience myself, and it's actually, if anything, it's enhanced my life in a huge way. Huge. I can't even explain. And yet we completely closed off from it, really, in
Right.
some respects.
That's a really good question. I mean, it makes sense, right? If having this personal experience outside of space-time, seeing and experiencing yourself as something not trapped in space-time, but something beyond space-time, if that could be so transformative, and if it's closer to the truth, than what we mostly believe, then why is it that most of us are trapped in this? And of course, the first answer is I don't know. So I honestly don't know, and I'm thinking about it. I can propose some kinds of answers, but they're very, very provisional. And the kind of answer I'm thinking about is I'm working with, again, my colleagues, Chetan and Chris Fields, Manish Singh, and Robert Prentner, and others, Federico Fagin, and so forth, to build mathematical models of what we call a theory of conscious agents or conscious units outside of space and time. So the idea is that reality outside of space-time, this deeper reality that I was talking about earlier, is like a vast social network, like the Twitterverse, right?
Okay.
Like the Twitterverse, right? You have literally millions of Twitter users, literally billions of tweets, lots of stuff trending. It's overwhelming. With that many users and tweets, it's overwhelming. You could never read all the tweets, interact with all the users. In that case, if you want to just get a picture of what's happening in the Twitterverse, in Australia versus the U.S., Sydney versus Los Angeles, or in a particular neighborhood or a particular house, right? You want a visualization tool, maybe a VR visualization tool with simple eye candy that does certain things that you can grasp, that lets you understand, okay, here's what's trending in Sydney, here's the new stuff that's trending in New York, and here's what's happening in London. Now I can zoom out to all of the United States. Here's the big picture, and now I want to zoom into Irvine, this tiny little town. That's a good visualization tool, right? So that's what space-time and physical objects are. That's our visualization tool. It's this vast network of conscious agents. That's the reality. And we've made a rookie mistake. We've mistaken our visualization tool for the realm that it was a visualization of. We just deny the existence of this realm that we're actually trying to visualize, and we just take the headset as the final reality. So science has only been a study of our headset pretty much so far. Now, but that doesn't quite get to your question, which is why have we made this rookie mistake? Why should we make this rookie mistake? And I don't know the answer to that. So I think the answer to that is going to come from this other deep question, which is, if consciousness is fundamental and all this network of conscious agents is what the reality is, why? What are they up to? What is the dynamics of consciousness about? And the answer is I don't know, but the only idea I've ever run across so far that's plausible, that's deep enough, comes from something called Gödel's incompleteness theorem.
Okay.
So this genius, Kurt Gödel, when he was only 25 years old, back in 1931, did what's arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, intellectual achievement in all of human history. He proved that, I'm not going to go into this thing in detail, I'll just say what this proof means. It means that no matter how much mathematical structure you discover, you've only begun. There's always going to be unbounded extra mathematical structure that's not entailed by the math you already know. It's true, but beyond the math that you already have right now. The math that you have right now could never reach it. So you actually need fundamental new insights and new ideas. And that will go on forever. So the idea then is that if consciousness is all that there is, consciousness is fundamental, then this mathematical structure is just about the possibilities of consciousness. And what Gödel's theorem is saying is that there's endless possible kinds of conscious experiences and conscious entities to explore. And in principle, no agent can ever understand all of it. There is no infinite God who can ever understand all of it. In principle, the most powerful God possible could not understand all that's available. It's always going to be an open-ended exploration. And that's what this is about. Every new step of the exploration, you perhaps get lost because you're in the brand new unknown. It's always unknown. And so that's an interesting idea, that consciousness is, I call this Gödel's candy store. right? There's endless varieties of
Wow.
conscious experiences yet to be tasted, yet to be sampled, yet to be explored. So there's this infinite Gödel's candy store, and it, in some sense, it doesn't exist there ahead of us. We're creating it as we explore. So consciousness is creating all the new goodies as it explores, but it's both exhilarating and it's as scary as hell, right? Because we're going into the unknown. And so there, that might be part of the answer to your question. It's scary to go into the unknown, and so we retreat into our headset. That might be the answer.
Wow, I love it. You know what? That's such a great metaphor for life, because there's two things that really resonated with me there. Is that if we bring in humility, the fact that we don't know it all, first of all, into our daily life, and then
Yes.
curiosity to keep exploring, because quite often we get so content, we shut down, we distract ourselves, and we stunt that expansion of ourselves in our life.
Yes. I absolutely agree. And you see that in the meditative experience, right? That if you, it's can be very scary to go into pure silence,
Mm.
genuine pure silence in which you let go of all thoughts. When you let yourself do that, I find that I look at those thoughts, all those ideas, as almost like a life raft. I want to go back into the world of thought. That's safe. I mean, that's the world I know. Getting out there where it's completely unknown, there's no thoughts, and being good with that is an acquired taste, right? So it's for most of us, we want noise, we want music, we want television, we want social interaction, we want some distraction. But going into the unknown, where we literally are naked, even without any thoughts to protect us, is what happens in meditation. And for most of us, that's a really acquired taste. That takes a while to get used to that. So it's both exhilarating to explore, but at least my personal experience and from a lot of people I've talked with, it's also quite scary. And it's a fundamental change in us when we explore that way in meditation. I think that what happens is a complete restructuring of our personality. This is not just a little bit of relaxation. I mean, to really go into the unknown and to begin to be able to see new things, fundamentally new things, is not a minor transformation. It's more like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, right? And when a caterpillar makes a chrysalis, it's not all love inside that chrysalis. What happens, right? The immune cells of the caterpillar attack and try to kill the cells inside that are responsible for transforming the caterpillar into a butterfly. Part of it is liquefying almost all of the structures of the caterpillar. It's a death. And so the immune system of the caterpillar is fighting this tooth and nail until it gets overwhelmed. It fights until it just can't fight anymore. It turns into this puddle of liquid, mostly, and then it gets restructured into a butterfly. Well, I mean, from the point of view of the caterpillar, this is horrific. It's the end of everything that's known. From the point of view of the butterfly, this is a birth. But you can see why you, in meditation, would have both experiences. Both, this is horrible, it's scary, it's a restructuring of my personality, but it's more than restructuring. It's like a dissolving of everything that I know and love and hold dear. And yet on the other side, you start to see, well, no, wait, there's the caterpillar's turning into a butterfly over there. But most of the time I'm identifying with the caterpillar, a little bit with the butterfly, but maybe later on identify more and more with the butterfly that's emerging. That's how deep I think the meditative process is. It's a complete restructuring, not a magic carpet to bliss.
Yeah, totally. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. With you having a regular meditation practice, how much has it affected your life, do you think, then, on a personal level, and how much has it lent into the work that you do?
It it has affected my life dramatically because it's one thing to talk about not knowing everything. It's another thing to sit there in silence and sort of experience being naked without the protection of my thoughts and the science that I know. And so just sitting there and facing the unknown, and then realizing that what I know as a scientist, what all of science together knows, all scientists together, is trivial compared to what we don't know. That's truly humbling, and it's very, very different from an attitude that we're about to get a theory of everything, right? Where we know everything. It's quite the opposite. It's saying that there is no such thing as a theory of everything. All that we could ever know is just not even a baby beginning to what's yet to be explored. So that's very, very humbling, but it's a kind of humbling that's not this like a false humility. It's more profound. Gödel is saying, you better take this quite seriously because this is the nature. This incompleteness theorem is fundamental. Even there is no God that could know everything. It's impossible. That's truly, truly stunning. So there's a deep humility that's the nice thing about science. It is discovered that there are all sorts of grounds for us to be deeply, deeply humble.
Yeah.
And the meditation does play into that when you face the end of your concepts and you face the unknown and then begin to realize how vast that unknown is.
Totally. How has your book been received, The Case Against Reality, in the science world itself?
Mixed. I have a theorem. So, and no one has been able to take down the theorem. And so there's no one out there who's saying, you're wrong and I can disprove you. So that's not what's going on. And I do get invited to give talks. I gave a talk, for example, at UC Davis to the Neurosciences Research Institute there were dozens and dozens of professors and postdocs in the neurosciences. And they invited me to come up and tell them that neurons don't exist when they're not perceived and brains cause none of our behaviors. That it's a useful fiction in everyday neuroscience to talk that way. And I talk that way. I'll say that area V4 of the brain causes color perception and area MT causes motion perception. And and it's perfectly fine casually to talk that way, but strictly speaking, it's false and brains don't even exist when they're not perceived. And so that's the nice thing about science. It would be one thing for me to say this if I had no theorem, right? Absolutely. And in fact, I published a book called Visual Intelligence back in 1998, where I said this at the end of my book, but I didn't have a theorem. And no one paid attention. It was sort of, great book, except for that last chapter, he goes off the rails. and I perfectly respect that. That's the right attitude for scientists. It took me a couple years to almost 10 years to go, okay, for me to get my colleagues to take this seriously, I need a theorem. So I had to learn evolutionary game theory. So I got graduate students,
Wow.
Justin Park, Brian Marion, we learned evolutionary game theory. They ran simulations. And then I worked with mathematicians and we proved a theorem. And now that I've got the theorem, I get invited to give a talk because this is different now. This is not someone just saying, oh, I think it's not a hand wave. It's a theorem based on our best biological theory, evolution by natural selection. So to their credit, scientists, when they're faced with an implication of one of their best scientific theories, then they do take it seriously. Now, I'm not saying that they immediately jump on board. There's, of course, the natural, okay, well, let me see if I can think of it in a different way. Maybe I can find some limitation to your theorem. That's perfectly fine. And in fact, that's what I want, is that hard-nosed give and take. But it is, it's the kind of attitude I like. It's not a dogmatism. It's an openness to saying, well, right now I still believe in space-time, but you got a theorem, so I need to think about it.
Yeah, beautiful. Fair enough. Yeah, that's great. Well, science is certainly, I'm certainly no scientist, but listening to these conversations and being able to have them has certainly helped me have a non-biased language that really helps to validate things, So
Yes.
I'm very grateful for that. I have a few questions on the show I ask everyone.
Sure.
And one is, what's your morning routine look like?
Oh, well, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is I have a cat named Fozzie.
Okay.
And he insists that the very first thing I do is let him rub on my slippers So he rubs on my slippers, and I pet him, and he purrs, and he turns over, and I rub his belly, and I rub, and we do this for a few minutes. And when he's happy, then I go get him a couple treats and give him some cat food, and then he's very, very happy. So that's my morning. The start of every morning is with Fozzie, and my other cat Kermit then gets treats, but he knows that Fozzie is going to be the one that so I do that, and then I usually my wife tends to sleep in a little bit later than me. She's a little bit more of a night owl. I'm a little bit more of a morning person. So I'll usually just go down there and get my breakfast and clean things up so that she'll have it open for her. So I do breakfast. And then I try to get into, I study a lot of mathematics and physics. I'm working on the math. My goal right now is working on this mathematical model that starts with conscious agents and shows that the long-term behavior of these conscious agents and their dynamics leads to these positive geometries that the physicists are finding behind space-time that then lead to space-time. My goal right now is to get a theory that starts with consciousness and its dynamics and leads to predictions of gluon scattering in the Large Hadron Collider. That's my goal.
Wow. Okay, fair enough. If you could have dinner with anyone from any time frame in the world, or even with a few people, who do you think it would be and why?
Oh, wow. Well, I think maybe it would be, I would probably choose maybe Leibniz, Gottfried Leibniz.
Okay.
His monadology idea is very, very similar to what I'm pursuing right now. He understood in the early 1700s, he understood this hard problem of consciousness. He wrote about it in monadology. He understood it. And of course, he has at least 100 IQ points more than me. So I would love to not just have dinner, but say, I'd like to have dinner with you. I'd like to have you around for a couple of years because here's the mathematics. I mean, you can learn this math much more quickly than me. You're a genius. He invented calculus, independent of Newton.
Oh, wow.
So he invented. So I would love to have Leibniz. I think Leibniz would have a kick. He would just pick up this math. He'd leave me in the dust after about 2 days. I just point him to he'd just leave me in the dust, and then I could read his papers, and I wouldn't have to do this stuff. He would just do it. So that's who I'd like to have dinner, but I'd need him for a few weeks so he can solve the problem. For me, it's going to take years, but Leibniz could knock it off in a few weeks, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And last question, or last thing to say, with everything that we've covered today, what would you like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I would say the thing to ponder on is, is it possible that you are not merely a little insignificant 100 to 200 pound piece of matter on a little planet in some insignificant part of the universe? Is it possible that you create space and time, that your potential is far greater than you imagine? And it's going to be scary to find out who you are, but also exhilarating.
The greatest adventure of all.
That's right.
Donald, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If anybody wants to grab your book or find out more about you, where's the best place to send them?
If you just Google The Case Against Reality, it's on Amazon, for example, or it's on Apple Books and so forth. So The Case Against Reality gives a nice introduction to these ideas for a broad audience. I didn't write it for a technical audience. If you're technical and you want to see the math, I've got a number of publications. If you just Google Donald Hoffman, Hoffman, my homepage at the University of California comes up, and I've got my Vita is listed on my homepage. It says Vita on there. If you just click on that, I've got 120 papers, published papers or so. Toward the end of the list are the more recent papers, and I've got hot links to the online papers. You can read papers, that I've got a paper called Objects of Consciousness that gives the mathematical model of consciousness and so forth. So
there's plenty for people to chew on, that's for sure. I just want to thank you for coming on the show today, and all that you do and all that you put out there to the world. You've certainly been an influence on myself personally with your work, and I just want you to know I greatly appreciate it. So thank
Thank
you,
you, Guy.
brother.
Thanks for this kind invitation too.
Cheers.